I'm a college dropout, single mom. There's so much about me that people are taken aback. Oh, I can't believe you're a college dropout. How are you credible in what you do?
On today's episode, we are joined by Liana Zavo, a PR executive, Forbes thought leader, and founder of Zavo Media PR Group, a globally recognized agency operating in 12 countries. After overcoming significant personal challenges, Liana built a thriving business that helps founders and organizations gain recognition, visibility, and credibility in the American market. She's also the creator of the Be Epic Method, a powerful framework that transforms personal and professional brands into industry authorities. In this conversation, Liana shares actionable strategies and how to leverage PR and personal branding to attract investors and build a lasting business image.
Welcome to the podcast, Liana.
Thank you so much for having me, Scherrie. I'm excited to get into the details and just make your audience just create this whole buzz with your audience. Let's do it.
And it's interesting because there are so many people who are, one, afraid of public speaking and being out front. And so when you start talking about public relations and going from being invisible to influential, what are some of the things that people can do within the frameworks of your Be Epic method to actually help them make that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. Going from being invisible to influential, that's what exactly happened to me. And the only way to make yourself visible is by changing your mindset. Everything stems from your mindset. And my Be Epic method was formulated because a lot of times what I've seen when I mentored my female executives is that I've seen that the mindset wasn't there in order to shift themselves to start telling their story authentically. They were afraid to be judged. They were afraid that the story is not going to line up, or maybe someone else is going to hear and they're going to get backlash. So there's a lot of times that I had to reframe their mindset. And so the Be Epic form was formulated to reset that mindset. And 80% is mindset, right? 20% is what you're putting into practice. And the first one is the belief aspect. Do you believe that what you're saying, your story is going to resonate with others on that level that it will make an impact? What impact is that you're doing? And then you become influential, right? When you can talk about your story and why it's such an impact and what it's doing, then you can become influential in any way. So my advice is take that Be Epic method, which stands for one word acronym, right? So one word acronym, and it breaks down to B is the belief, E is the empowerment, P is that personal satisfaction within you in order to tell your story, I is the inner courage that comes from your inner voice, and C is that courage to step out of your comfort zone. How many are stuck in their comfort zone thinking, I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll do a video. I'll talk about what sets me apart from the crowded marketplace. What sets you apart should be talked about now. 89% of founders are aligned with video content. So if you don't have video of some sort, right, you're basically lost, and they will go on to the next person that they will be interested in your field, in your industry. So make sure that in order for you to become influential, start becoming more inspiring with your story.
And so when you mention being inspiring, I like to think that my life is not just exciting. I enjoy it, but in terms of how I present it to others, how can I be more authentic in a way that will attract others? Because you really do want that magnetic attraction when you are trying to find your tribe and your group of people who believe in the things that, you're offering to the marketplace.
In order for you to be authentic, you need to start speaking up. And that's one of the pillars that personal brand stands on. Authenticity, consistency, and your value proposition. What is that purpose? When you have a purpose and what you're doing. So I work with my clients are in the legal sector, they're financial advisors, in the tech, medical professionals. And so when I work with them, and I like to work with the corporate professionals because it's harder for them. They're very risk adverse and they hate talking about themselves and their story, right? It's all about what can I do in my services? But if your services are great, but if they can't know the backstory of what got you to where you are today, the challenges, your success story, people want to know you. And the only way they connect with you is based on one factor, Scherrie. It's the emotional connection you build with others. And the only way they know you're authentic is when they see that emotional connection. And so if they don't see that emotional connection, the authenticity just is stripped away from your personal brand. So make sure that when you are being authentic, that is when you are going to be set apart from the crowded marketplace, right? There's so many attorneys, right? How do you set yourself apart from others? So make sure to be authentic, consistent, and bring a lot of value.
One thing that I thought was really interesting about what you do, you are not just geographically limited to one particular country. You've actually helped international founders with entry into America and other places. What are some of the things that entrepreneurs need to consider if they are looking to go outside of their region, their country, and just maybe look at a global brand?
Absolutely. So, one of my favorite things is to bridge the gap for founders internationally into the American market. I know that there's so many, first of all, a lot of international founders will love the credibility in the American market. And so, once they get into the American market, they know that they will gain profitability right away. One of the things, the challenges that I see for Americans trying to get and break into the global market, especially when I was breaking into the global market, I had to make sure that I would adjust with cultures, right? There's so many people that don't know about the American culture, right? So you have to make sure that you match and mirror, right? And so if you're going to be working with Dubai, for example, and people from Dubai, they have different cultures and different lifestyles, and they approach PR in a different way. So make sure you learn the scope of who you're dealing with before actually getting yourself involved. So I did a lot of research. Each country I dive into, I make sure I travel there first. I make sure I scope it out. I get in with strategic partners. So you have to have a backstory yourself in order to have that feel who you're dealing with. And then you go and start working internationally with those clients.
So you're going to have some founders who feel like I just make widgets and it's not important for me to have a personal brand because I'm just great at making widgets. How do you address those objections for people who feel like the actual product, if they're in a product based business, that, how great my product is more important than my personal brand?
I love that question. So how many people are also doing other widgets? There's competition is insane. So people don't invest into your products at the end of the day. They invest into you. That's point blank. People invest in you before they invest into your products or services. So if they don't like what you stand for, if they don't like how you make them feel, they won't invest into your widgets, right? At the end of the day, they want to know what you stand for. And if you are just trying to push your product forward, what happens when you're trying to create another product? Are you going to start from scratch? People don't know who you are. And you will attract more investors if you start talking about who you are, like Shark Tank. Shark Tank is a perfect example. They come on that right show, they talk about themselves and what the Shark Tank thinkers are looking for, right? The sharks are looking for your story, what got you to where you are today. If they don't resonate with your story, they don't care how much money you make. They want to work with other entrepreneurs that they can actually invest into. So a lot of times I remember them saying, especially Mark Cuban and even Lori, I'm looking at you individually. And if you're hungry, if you're persistent, what is your backstory before I want to invest into your product? So if it's very hard to work with you, no one is going to invest into your product. So you also have to think about the other side. Obviously, those who are creating products, they want to have an exit strategy. What is that exit strategy, right? But in order for you to have that exit strategy, you have to invest into your personal brand. You have to make sure that you will invite those investors in so they can invest into you, who you are. And then you can perhaps down the line exit.
This is so good. Let's pretend that I'm Jane Doe and I have this brand new business. I don't even have any social media accounts. Where is the first place that I need to start building my brand?
Oh, Jane Doe, you're so behind. I don't even know. The first thing I would say is start, if you don't have social media, then start creating it. But in person is just as effective, right? Obviously, there's nothing like a great online reputation, and I thrive on that. So if I work with anyone and I have to first see what your online reputation stands for, right? If I'm going to hire you for any type of strategic partnership, I have to make sure that there's something about you on your online reputation that I can say, okay, he was or she was spotlighted, highlighted. And I'll bring you into a small example. I actually was supposed to work with this client and we got on our first call and I see that I was Googling him. I said, let me Google your name. And so I started Googling him and I said, "Were you in jail for 5 years?" He says, "Yes, I was in jail, but I'm coming back. I'm making a whole new wave about myself. I was in real estate." And he did a lot of things. And now he's trying to rebrand himself as a fractional CEO. So in order for you to do that, you need to have a great online reputation, because I just Googled him and I just saw that he just came out of jail. And do you think there's credibility in that? There is no credibility. So if you don't exist online, if there's nothing about you, you don't exist. So social media is great, Sherry. It's relatability. People can relate to you. But what about your credibility? Who's speaking about you? Who's validating that story? So make sure you have someone who's validating your story, because that in itself creates a lot of visibility, which is credibility, which then leads into profitability. So don't just rely on social media. But then going back to what you asked, if you don't have any social media, you are definitely falling off the grid. You don't exist. And 82% of people will Google you before stepping foot in your location, getting on that call, or even signing a contract. So you can, these statistics, they're major. So they're not my statistics. So Google, you can see that 82% of people will Google you before doing any type of business with you.
And so that is such a good point for that person who may not have a stellar reputation online or who may just not have a footprint at all. How do you rehabilitate yourself and start getting a better footprint? Because getting on the first page of Google or getting recognized for someone who has a name like Julie Smith, there are zillions of Julie Smiths. So, how do you stand out online and build your credibility so that people will find you?
A great question. So the first thing you have to do is hire a publicist, okay? And you need to start having stories that the press will start picking up. You need to make sure you start creating a very compelling narrative with your publicist. Then you need to work on your personal brand. When you have a third party who validates your story, just say, for example, we get you into Forbes. Forbes validates who you are. They check your background, everything is aligned, then that in itself will create a footprint, right? What happens is there's also called a Google Knowledge Panel. Say there's so many Sallys, like you said. Sally has a last name that is aligned with others. There's a lot of them, and it's hard to set you apart. So we need to create a Google Knowledge Panel for you, and that's not only when you have a last name like everyone else, for example, or Sally Smith. I'm talking about everyone needs to have some sort of Google Knowledge Panel. So if you Google my name, Liana Zavo, you'll see there's a Google Knowledge Panel with my age. There are the books that I've written, the articles where I've been featured. Everything is intimate. The authority presence is there. So whether you sound like someone else, your name or not, you still want to stand out, because that Google Knowledge Panel is when Google actually approves you and verifies you. It says, okay, this person is legitimate. We can go ahead and give them their own panel, which is called the Google Knowledge Panel.
And so that's such a great point because there are times that corporations or investors may be getting research about you and they see where maybe you've been featured in Forbes, you've been featured in Entrepreneur Magazine, and things like that. What are some of the different outlets that have more authority? Because, does a Wikipedia page have more authority than a listing in Forbes? What are some of the things that influencers and entrepreneurs should shoot for as they build their credibility?
Yeah, so Wikipedia won't pick you up unless you've been trending on Google for a while. So Wikipedia has their own set of criteria, right? Their own rules. So you got to start small, perhaps do local type of press and media coverage, and then you grow. But what really has high authority? Obviously, if you look at the domain of Forbes, it has a really high authority. Wikipedia also has a high authority. But again, Wikipedia doesn't take everyone. They're very picky and selective. So, in order for you to have a proven track record, you need to have all those different types of publications. And then we can, as publicists as well, we can help with that, get you featured in Wikipedia. If you have no, I would say, presence at all in the press, the first thing you should do is a press release, which is like a nationwide press release. And we also do global releases where we announce your company. That in itself will propel you forward because you've been announced, you're legitimate. And there are times, Sherry, when someone comes up to me and says, look, I'm running a nonprofit organization. And I said, okay, I will need to get testimonials. I will need to make sure that someone is vouching on behalf of you. And there was times when they would say, we can't really get testimonials because the CEO won't answer us. If I'm confused about if I can't get the things I need for a press release right away, and I see that you're going around the bush with it, I can't even do a press release. I don't want to even work with you. Like, I have to make sure who I'm working with is legitimate, and your company, it's your company, and it's not like you have just taken this company from someone else. Like, I came across a person who hijacked another nonprofit from someone else, and it was an insane thing. And he approached me to actually create a positive image about him. And I said, look, I cannot create a positive image unless I speak to the CEO who owned this nonprofit before. How do I know it's legitimately yours? And so he won't answer my calls. I'm like, then I can't represent you. Right. So my name is on the line. I have to make sure that what I'm doing, right, is my reputation, and I'm not going to jeopardize that.
And we're going to go back to Jane Doe, my favorite person. So for Jane Doe, who is starting out and they just realized that, hey, I'm going to go make my widgets and I'm going to hire somebody like Liana to work with to do all the things PR for me. What is like a reasonable timeline and set of expectations that Jane should have when working with you? Should she expect to see some of these results in 6 months? Is it an ongoing process? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I like working with my clients anywhere from a year to a year and a half, because PR, it's not something like you do with advertising or marketing. PR is actually we're building trust factor with the audience and creating a positive image. For me, the longer I work with you, the longer I create a story for you, the better it is, right? And so deliverables are every month. I used to work with a PR firm. So before I started, right, I used to work for my family's restaurant on the Upper East Side in Manhattan. And so I started learning the scopes and how I can get press for my restaurant. And we hired a PR agency. They told us, look, we're going to deliver, and there were no deliverables. We hired them for about a year, and they maybe delivered couple times throughout the year. And so what happened to the other times? They would say the journalists didn't get back to us and we have to wait. It's stalling time. And who likes that? It's not, for me at least, I know it's frustrating. If I'm paying you X amount of dollars, I want to know what is my ROI. And so if I know that I just pitched your story, but in the meantime, what can I do in order to fill that gap, those 2 weeks that you haven't heard from me? So I have to get you on a podcast. I have to make sure I have to get you on a speaking engagement, something that will propel your brand forward. So remember, PR is not just publications, which is majority of what we do, but it's also getting you on podcasts. It's getting you in front of the audience in different ways so that your name is trending and we're creating a buzz. Again, going back to Jane, you want to work with me? That's great. First, let's do a consultation call, see if we actually are a good fit, right? And see if we can work together. And this is a long haul, right? It's not like a 3-month thing where I can say what I could do sometimes they ask, can you just give me a press release? Just announce my company. I can't do that. That's not a problem. We can do one-time announcement and that's it. But for me, what I like to do is work on a long-term basis.
One thing that I'm thinking of as you're going through some of this is for the person who may be challenged with a negative image online, how much of your work is almost like crisis management? Because if you have someone who has gone out here and done all these things that may be questionable, may have a poor public image, how much rehabilitation is not actually PR, but crisis management? Is that what you work with as well?
Absolutely. Crisis management, as I mentioned before, the person that I Googled, and before when we got on our initial call, and he didn't mention that he just got out of jail, right? So when I Googled him, that's the first thing that popped up. And he's like, oh, yeah. That's me. So for me, and I told him that's crisis management. So 80% will be we need to deal with this crisis, and then the 20% is where we have to start getting the other thing in, which is going to be your social media, getting the buzz out on all the social media platforms. But the crisis strategy will be, okay, how can we get the trust back of the audience that you lost the public's trust? What are the strategies around that? So a lot of that has to be mitigated around your authenticity. What are you doing for the public? And how can we turn around your story? Said, you know what? He came back, he's a different man, and this is what we're doing in order to revive him or revive his personal brand. 80% in this case has to be crisis management. It's like the insurance. Crisis management, I have to say, a lot of times I work with my clients, I give them crisis management like an insurance blanket, as to say, look, God forbid something goes wrong, we need to do this crisis. We need to hold on to this crisis management factor just in case something goes wrong. So depending who I work with, major companies, I have to make sure crisis management is already embedded with the retainer.
Let's look at that from a standpoint of how you show up authentically in the marketplace and also how you tell your personal story. If someone's introducing themselves, like Jane is for the first time, is she actually chopping her story up among all these outlets, Forbes, Instagram, podcasts? Do you have a recommendation for how she should break her story down to introduce herself and where it's most appropriate?
Yeah, so if they do my 21-day personal branding challenge, that's where I teach them how to break down their story. So depending on which outlet you're going to speak, depending what social media channel, we give you directly the direction and strategy as to how to formulate your story. But go back to what Jane should be doing. So for her, it's important to start setting her tone and her authenticity. Who is she and what sets her apart? Her value proposition and what makes her significant in what she does. And her authenticity needs to shine through with the challenges. Going back to a little bit about me, I'm a college dropout, single mom. There's so much about me that people are taken aback. Oh, I can't believe you're a college dropout. How are you credible in what you do? But all the mentors I had to hire and I had to work 10 times harder because when you're a college dropout, you have to make sure that you are 10 times more prepared, right, than someone that has just a degree and a paper in their hand. Each social media channel, each publication has their own way of expressing themselves, right? When it's on video, obviously it's very short. We're talking in sound bites, it's snippets, right? We're not doing a novel. When it's a Forbes thing, when we're talking about when we're pitching you to Forbes, we have to make sure that there's a lot of fact checking involved. What makes you stand out, make sure everything is aligned. And obviously, if it's not aligned, they're not going to pick your story. So, video, obviously, social media is totally different. PR on social media is different than publications. Two separate animals, two separate entities. So, if you are just starting out, start with social media and start talking about yourself, do video content, and set the tone of why are you the best in what you do.
So, Liana, you mentioned a 21-day challenge. Please tell us more because these are some great things for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, Sherry, a lot of times people are so hesitant to do PR for themselves. They're like, what is PR? I have no idea. And so, for them to understand and get a better grasp of what we can do, I give them this ability to sign up. It's on Eventbrite, those who are interested. It's 21 days. You get me one on one for 21 days, and we get on calls. And I have to make sure I structure your story, your narrative the right way so that when you start speaking about yourself, you grasp the attention, you create buzz, and we go strategically. There's so much that's included, and I have to dissect exactly how to propel your personal brand out there, what's going to be engaging, the do's, the don'ts. So in order to kickstart your personal brand and you don't know where to start, I highly recommend every professional to look into this because it's a low hanging fruit as opposed to what I would charge for my retainer. But this way, at least you get me in your corner, you work with me, and you know that at least you're kickstarting your brand and you're not going to wait till, I don't know, September or even next year. So do it now, invest in yourself, because if you're not investing in yourself, someone is already investing in themselves and they're ahead of you, right? So if you're a serious entrepreneur, and I'm sure you take everything seriously, like I just feel bad for people who go to school for so many years and then they're like, oh, my personal brand doesn't really matter. I work with from like referrals. They just refer people to me. But don't you care about your narrative? Why don't you want to have control of your story? You hold the pen to your story. Why can't you have a compelling narrative and control that story so that you can make a bigger impact? So that's something, I need to explain to my professionals when I work with them, that they shouldn't be afraid to express themselves, because that in itself will just connect you with a bigger community of people.
And I think it really goes back to the very first thing that you said when we started the recording mindset. They don't talk to you about PR in law school and medical school when you're going to the police academy or the firemen's academy. That's not something they discuss. You do need a personal brand.
Absolutely. You need a personal brand regardless. And I don't know why they don't teach that. It's a little harder for me because I need to dissect what PR can do for you. Because think about it, PR is not what marketing is and it's not what advertising is, right? Advertising is, okay, I'll plaster my face in the back of the bus and or Times Square, that's advertising. People know you paid for that, right? It's very easy to do. You pay, you get your face there. But what about the trust factor? there is no trust in seeing your face on the billboard. Yeah, we know you're there. I can pay also $50,000 to get on the billboard. But what really truly matters is your story. Then, when the publication actually chose your story and says, you know what, I think this story is going to make a difference and we want to validate this founder. So that is more of an ROI for you, because you know that now this publication is trending. Now you're on Google. It's gaining organic growth. There are backlinks. It's not going anywhere. Anytime people Google you, it's there. Anytime people Google you, when it comes to advertising, they won't see your ads that you performed. They don't see your billboard. And even if they do, they know it's not credible. So the only promotional tool from marketing and advertising and PR that is cost effective and people trust is PR.
So let's talk about a balance in terms of where an entrepreneur should put their time. If you had to look at a percentage of energy and time and resources that go towards advertising, marketing versus PR, what's your recommendation?
I always say that the two things that go hand in hand for me, and then you can do advertising. For me, you have to start with PR and then marketing, right? We need to get your story out, invest in yourself, really hone in into who you are, because that is your legacy. You're leaving a legacy. Hone in on your story so that you can start showing up as an expert, as a thought leader. At the end of the day, PR creates thought leaders, right? You can't just be a leader. You want to be a thought leader. Why do people come to you for insights? Why do people come to you for advice, right? If you're not a thought leader and you don't know how to really hone in on your thought leadership, you're just going to be another number. So, what PR is and does is we hone in on your thought leadership. We have to make sure that then you take that thought leadership, for example, right? That, say I got you into Fox News. You take that Fox News segment on TV, and then you put that all over, distribute that all over social media channels. That's marketing, right? Take that and distribute it. At least you know it's a trusted source. But what are you marketing if there's nothing to market, right? Marketing doesn't make sense unless you're marketing a story or a publication or a TV segment on what you have been speaking about, on your thought leadership. And then maybe perhaps down the line, you can do advertisement when you already have that social proof, when you have that credibility. So the first thing you should invest into is your PR. So crucial. And I want to dispel the myth, Sherry. It's not more expensive than marketing or advertising. It's not. It's actually less expensive, and it's actually more cost effective, because you know that everything that's been featured about you, it's on Google and it's always getting that organic growth. And you know that your ROI, you're getting tenfold.
That is so good. Now, you've given us so many nuggets, but if you had just one piece of advice to share with entrepreneurs on how to play big faster with public relations, what would it be?
I would say do your homework. Make sure that whoever you're hiring to do your PR has their own credibility. And, like, for example, I create these summits every 3, 4 months. Every 4 months, I would say I have these amazing summits that take place in New York City on Fifth Avenue. And I just recently had one on March 12th for Women's History Month. When you are consistent, you know that you can trust that person. So do your homework. Make sure that whoever's going to represent you has representation themselves and is actually out there in the public doing things. Because if they're not out there themselves, they're not going to do much for you. Right. So I just started a podcast myself. I'm getting all my clients on my podcast as sponsors. I'm getting them as guests. I am making sure that I repurpose everything that I do and involving my guests as well, and my clients as well. So making sure that who you're working with has high energy, wants to also be as interactive, because if that PR is interactive and you're actually working like with me, for example, you know you're going to get so much more back, because I'm working on my personal brand and I'm always evolving myself. So if I'm evolving, you're evolving with me.
Love it. So, how can someone take this conversation offline and contact you if they want to find out more about who you are and how to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can follow me on LinkedIn, which is a great place, and make an appointment with me. You get a PR consultation, either with myself or my team. We'll audit your online reputation, see what strategies to be implemented in order to propel you forward. And I think that's the best way to go about it. Or even Zavo Media PR on Instagram. If you go under Zavo Media PR, there's also a consultation link that you can just book your call with us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
And to everyone else, until next time, play big faster.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Play Big Faster podcast. Want more entrepreneurial content?
I like this.
Make sure to subscribe for future episodes.
Already subscribed. I just clicked on it.
Don't forget to like and leave a review. Share with a friend that needs this in their life.
I think you need this more than I.
Oh, and make sure to follow Scherrie on IG at Scherrie Speaks. And remember to play big faster.